Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our community worship at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville. I am Dawn Dirks, and I am coming to you from Oregon. I am so happy to be serving as your worship weaver today. I now live on the ancestral homeland of the Kalapuya people. Our Rugby Road Sanctuary in Charlottesville is on land which, for many centuries, has been the dwelling place of the Monacan people. This land was also, for a time, part of plantations which enslaved African Americans for labor and profit. We honor all those who dwelt here before and all those whose lives led to this moment of our gathering as a community of memory and hope. We are thrilled that beginning this Sunday, we will be worshiping from our many sanctuaries with some 40 people at Rugby Road and others of us in many places through the magic of Zoom. Welcome all, whoever you are right now, wherever you are right now. And now Haley Owens from our Board of Trustees is here to welcome you.
Hello and good morning. What a pleasure it is to be Zooming in with the Zoom cohort and not quite seeing all those who are in the sanctuary, but so glad that we can gather in all these different ways. I want to share with you one thing that I love about being a part of our congregation is how I'm inspired to do justice work. It's so important fighting systematic wrongs, and it's so hard to do that alone. It's actually impossible. So it's so fulfilling for me to be a part of a community that's actively engaged in living out our faith's value. So part of how I've been getting involved in all this is doing Impact, an interfaith action group that works together to address issues like access to childcare, affordable housing, and environmental justice, and other issues affecting congregations and neighbors in Charlottesville and Albemarle. If this sounds interesting to you, or you've been involved in it before and you want to get back in this year, I invite you to come to our annual assembly this Tuesday at 6:30 on Zoom for our kickoff event of the year. It's a special interfaith space, and we'll get grounded in the call to do justice work and hear updates about the current issues we're working on. And we'll also vote on what new issue we'd like to take on this year. The new issues are focused on impacts around climate change. So some of the ones that we'll be choosing between are storms and flooding and mold, transportation, and high temperatures, utility bills. And these are issues we know that disproportionately impact people of color. So this annual assembly is a great event to attend if you'd like to see what Impact is up to and get oriented for the year. So please shoot me an email if you'd be interested. I'd love to see some of these faces on that call on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Haley. Also joining us in our service are Breck Gastinger, Reverend Linda, and Scott DeVoe in Charlottesville. And we are so thankful to Sean Scally and Kelly Dryden for their tech support today. And thanks to Jenny Gaden and Johanna Woodchild for being welcomers to the Rugby Road Sanctuary. And we are blessed by a new anthem today from our virtual choir, made beautiful by the images from video editor Ellie Ransom. A few announcements. In coming weeks, invitations will be going out to members of the congregation to offer everyone a chance to join us in person for worship. Each week, a different group will be invited, so everyone has a chance to be in person if they like. Our hope is that before long, COVID cases will go down and we can include more people in our building. In the meanwhile, thanks for your patience. I bring us together now with these words from Lynn Harrison. Committed to respond to the call of a wounded world, we join together this day with loving hearts, hands, and minds. May we bring forth this day new wisdom, strength, and courage to create a new world not of wealth, but well-being. A world of new peace and abundance for all. Rising to the calls deep within us and all around us, may we circle round today for all of us and for all people of the earth.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
Together. And please join me in the hand motions. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is a church of the open minds. This is a church of the helping hands. This is the church of the loving hearts. We light this chalice in the Rugby Road Sanctuary, and if you have a chalice in your own home, please feel free to light it now.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Let me tell you the parable of the spoons. There once was a mystic who was fascinated by the idea of heaven and hell. One day, in a deep meditation, the mystic came face to face with the creator of the universe. And of course, their first question was, What is the nature of the relationship between heaven, hell, and earth? And the creator of the universe clapped its cosmic hands, and immediately the two were in a room. In the center of this room, there was a round table, and in the center of that table, there was a roaring fire. Over the fire, there was a huge cauldron of a seething stew with a smell so enchanting that the mystic was drawn closer to the table, but not too close, because all around the table, there were sickly, unhealthy, groaning people, each of them with a long spoon, long enough to reach the cauldron in the center of the table, but not long enough to feed themselves. And they all struggled and they tried hard, but they never quite managed. The mystic didn't need to ponder long to understand that this was hell. Instantly, the creator of the universe clapped those cosmic hands again, and they were in a different room, except it was the same room. So much of the room was identical. There was the round table, the roaring fire, the cauldron with that delicious smelling stew in the center, and around it, people seated. But these people looked healthy. They looked happy. In fact, they were laughing and telling each other stories and jokes. Some of them were singing songs. Some of them were just listening attentively. And they also had those same long, overlong spoons. But as they dipped out of the stew, they didn't trouble themselves trying to make that long spoon reach back to their mouths. They simply reached across the table and fed someone else. And when they were hungry, they had the humility and the clarity of mind to open their mouths and let themselves be fed. The mystic didn't have to ponder long to recognize that this was heaven. And the beauty of this story is that it isn't just about heaven and hell as an afterlife idea, but it shows us how we can choose to experience heaven or hell here on earth. And as a matter of fact, this story inspired this song. No one gets to heaven alone, to heaven alone, to heaven alone. No one gets to heaven alone. We get there side by side, side by side, side by side, side by side. We get there side by side. No one heals the world on their own, the world on their own, the world on their own. No one heals the world on their own. We're healing side by side, side by side, side by side, side by side. We're healing side by side. No one does the work on their own, the work on their own, the work on their own. No one does the work on their own. We're working side by side, side by side, side by side, side by side. We're working side by side, side by side, side by side, side by side. We're healing side by side, side by side, side by side, side by side. We get there side by side.
Every Sunday, as a central part of our worship, we invite one another to give financial gifts to support the ongoing vital ministries of this congregation. And we also feature important social action causes, inviting you to give special gifts for the needs of our wider community. In the month of October, we are focusing on the food pantry of our congregation and the many other food ministries we support. Let's find out more with this video.
Food Pantry is a UUCville effort to distribute food obtained from the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. We distribute to whomever comes to our door. We give out food on the first Friday of each month. Aided by about 10 volunteers, we unload an average of a ton of food each Friday, to 27,121 pounds of food this year. We unload the truck from the food bank on our Summit House parking lot, organizing it to fill boxes and bags for each family. Since the beginning of COVID, we register folks using the food bank software while they remain in their cars. We then load the cars with food equal to the size of their family. Some folks pick up for other families. We are fast. We unload the truck at 8:30, and by 10 a.m., we have served the families who have arrived. For this 1 year, October 2020 to September 2021, we only paid $321 because the food bank had a COVID grant that paid $2,786. To run our program for a year, we would have paid $3,000. Each month, we help an average of 79 people who are in 23 families. The 79 people include people under the age of 18, at least 40 people ages 19 to 59, and 17 people aged 60 or over. It's a great program for our congregation.
Food Pantry is an important part of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville's food ministry. Food is one of the basic human needs that everyone deserves to have met. We invite you to give generously to this month's social action collection to support our food pantry. And also, we invite you to consider being a volunteer in one of our food ministry programs. You can find more information at our uucharlottesville.org website. And today, you can give by going online, mailing a check, or for those of you in the church today, you may put money or checks in the basket. And of course, we appreciate your offerings to support the ongoing ministries of the church. Some of you have pledged and have automatic deductions made each week. We honor that. For those of you who like to give weekly online, this is your opportunity to do so. There are so many ways that we give and receive gifts in this community. Our board and staff are dedicated to stewarding all of our gifts well with mission and vision. Together, we build the future of our congregation and our larger community. I am thankful we are all on this journey together. I am thankful for our generous hearts. And now let us dedicate all of the many gifts together by saying, we accept these gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good.
This is my song, O God of all the nations.
The choir for the beautiful music, and Ellie Ransom for those beautiful images. It's a powerful message for us to remember how wonderful it is that all lands on the earth have people who care and the beauty of nature, and all of us have our hopes and our dreams. It's wonderful being in the sanctuary with about 30 of the congregants here. We have the doors to Rugby Road wide open, so sometimes we're hearing children going by or traffic going by, but we keep the doors open both as a welcome, but also it helps with air ventilation because we are trying to keep everybody safe during these COVID days. Today, I want to talk a little bit about Unitarian Universalism and the world. When I teach about Unitarian history, one of the things I'm most proud of is our roots in the 1500s in a kingdom in Eastern Europe called Transylvania. In fact, I find that time in our history so fascinating. Sometimes I could talk for hours on just that part of our history, never getting out of Europe, even though a lot else has happened. And one of the things I love about back then is when the king of Transylvania, John Sigismund, converted to Unitarianism, he also made a very important decision. He made the decision to tolerate, to allow the practice of many religions, not just his own. At that time, religious tolerance was unheard of. The accepted religion in a state or a princedom or a kingdom was what the king said was accepted. Transylvania in the 1500s was a crossroads from Asia and the Mideast and Western Europe. There were Muslims and Jews and Eastern Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholics and Reformed Christianities, including Lutherans and Calvinists. And in this interfaith and international mix of people, Sigismund understood how important it was to allow each group to maintain their ethnic culture and their religion. What he requested for people in his kingdom was not that they believed as he did. He only requested that people treat each other fairly. King John's inspiration was the revolutionary cleric named Francis David, who said, "We do not need to think alike to love alike." So impressive, 500 years ago, so revolutionary. Well, then jump 400 years forward, and in the mid-20th century, following two horrific world wars and a massive, terrifying Holocaust, many leaders of the world came together to form the United Nations. Today, October 24th, is UN Sunday. It's the 76th anniversary of the UN's formal founding in 1945. The dream was for the UN to bring nations together, to be able to promote human rights and peaceful resolution of differences. And back then, Unitarians were very closely connected to those ideals and took part in the conversations that formed the UN. Our faith's history with the United Nations can be traced back to the early 20th century because both Unitarians and Universalists were active in the League of Nations. And later, they closely monitored the creation of the UN. And since 1946, we have always had an official delegate to the United Nations from the Unitarians. And in the 1950s, both the Universalists and the Unitarians were adopted resolutions to support the United Nations. And then when they consolidated in 1973 to form the current UUA, they once again, as a denomination, reaffirmed their commitment to support the UN. So our faith was closely connected to the UN, but also then to the development of and responses to the 1948 UN resolution called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, something that I wish all of our schools would teach all of our fourth graders, and then again, when they take a world history later on in high school. They need to teach the UN Declaration of Human Rights because this milestone document in human history, in fact, Eleanor Roosevelt said it should be treated like the Magna Carta or the Declaration of Independence. It's such an important document. It was drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from around the world, and it was proclaimed as a common standard for achievements for all people in all nations. Its proclamation is that human beings are born free and equal. And of course, that is echoed in the Unitarian Universalist principle, our first principle, that we affirm that all people have inherent worth and dignity. And then in 1963, when the UUA principles and purposes were merged into one document, it ended up looking a lot like the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So today, I want to lift up the sixth of our principles, which is not the one most known. In fact, if I was to ask people to name the 7 principles, that might be the last one they could remember. What is it? The first one is inherent worth and dignity of every individual. The 7th is the interconnected web of which we're all a part. Well, the 6th one says that we affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Here at UUCville, I want to offer a shout out to Al Reynolds and Doris Glick for their work to keep this congregation connected to the noble ideals of the United Nations. Thank you, Al and Doris. I know you're here with us on Zoom today. Happy UN Sunday. And if the rest of you are looking for a way to celebrate UN Day, you can join in a forum that's being held on Zoom this afternoon at 4 p.m. UU congregations and the United Nations Association are sponsoring this forum this afternoon, and they'll have leading experts talking about what we can do as faith-based organizations and as individuals to meet the ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement to address climate crisis. So recognizing the inequitable impact of climate change on poor and minority communities, the program is going to explore ways that we can collaborate, like in Impact, which Impact is also taking on the effects of climate change, but ways that we can meet the ambitious climate goals equitably and justly. If you're interested in this, I've asked Don Dirks to put in the Zoom chat box the link to where you can register today, and they'll send you the link for the Zoom session. And if anybody here in the sanctuary at Rugby Road would like to maybe try that, going to that forum this afternoon, I can give you a printout of the link. Anyway, thinking about our history way back in Transylvania in the 1500s, thinking about our history with the United Nations in this 20th century that we just ended. Well, we didn't just end it, it's 21 years ago. Gotta get my head wrapped around, time is moving on. This has been a century that American UUs have been dedicated to promoting international collaboration and interconnectedness. And yet in recent years, the last 20 years, the ideals of being involved to help in the many crises and problems of the world have often put us, the United States, into dominating, colonial, defensive, or even belligerent roles. And we have so many domestic problems to address here at home: racism, poverty, voter suppression, sexism, and on and on. We have so many problems, it has been easy for us to turn our eyes away from how we are involved in the world and just say, let's focus on ourselves. Let's stop messing around in or messing up those other nations. We've been hearing this actually from some of our biggest leaders, that we should just focus on ourselves and forget the world. Because we actually, it's been problematic. Well, here's the truth, which we all really know. There is no way we can separate ourselves or forget the world. We're a part of it. One of the huge impacts of the climate crisis is that the whole globe is being affected by it. And some areas are suffering more from drought and floods, and other areas are doing okay. And some places people can't live. And you know what? It doesn't have anything to do with national borders. The climate crisis has to do with the globe. So part of the mass migrations we're seeing is as much due to climate change as to political problems. And that's only going to get worse. So I think we have to understand, who are those people knocking at our doors and the borders? Why do they need refuge? And we also need to understand they are not going to go away, because as long as there's drought or fire or famine in their areas, they're going to do what it takes to stay alive and to keep their families alive. So we need to begin to think about, especially people of faith, what is our role as a nation on the planet Earth? Can we be a place of refuge for our neighbors? We may be turning to other neighbors at some point, needing refuge ourselves. We know that right here in Central Virginia, we're going to be soon welcoming 250 families who are refugees because of political turmoil in Afghanistan. Our congregation has decided to answer the call to help out with the work of the International Rescue Committee. I encourage everyone to check out our newsletter and our webpage and find out more about where we're headed in this effort. And those of you who are in the sanctuary, Clarice Repass is here today, and she knows a lot about what they're planning. She's on the planning team right now. So our Unitarian Universalist history, our values, and our covenantal principles all are calling us to care about the whole world, not just those of us here in this town or even our nation. We have to expand our care for all. We cannot be separated from the crises of the world, the real lives of people who need our help. And even though our own domestic problems of racism and poverty are linked, our problems, they are linked to the problems in the world. One of my favorite heroes of theological justice making right now is the Reverend William Barber. He's a former NAACP leader, and he's now the head of the Poor People's Campaign, which has been a national campaign. But this fall, he is increasingly widening his focus from the domestic crisis of poverty in this country to the international problems. He's going to be on the panel this afternoon with the UN Forum. A few weeks ago, he was in the Vatican talking with international leaders about the prophetic role of religious leaders to work together around the world to end poverty. Part of what he said there, speaking to this international community, was this: It is our theological conviction that nations will be judged by how the least of these are treated. And he quoted Matthew 25. That scripture says that it's not the rich man who will be judged by how he treated the poor man at his door, although that will happen, he says, in his tradition. But he says that scripture is actually speaking about nations, that nations will be judged by how we choose to either welcome or reject the poor, the hungry, the sick, the imprisoned. So he says these theological convictions remind us again and again why a poor people's campaign everywhere is a moral campaign, guided by sociological insights, building fusion coalitions among the poor and across all the lines that try to separate us, the lines of race and class, national borders, so often dividing the poor and pitting them against each other. So we agree with the UN Declaration of Human Rights that the things that some nations have treated as privileges are actually human rights. And if we as a society fail to meet those basic needs for some people, we will just create a disparity that will lead to violence. And it's an act of violence when we let a child go hungry. It's an act of violence to deny quality health care or education to poor people. And when we allow policies to perpetuate this violence, we are sowing the seeds of war, mass migration, and climate catastrophe. So it's a global problem. And I say, preach it, Reverend Barber. We cannot ignore the calling of the world. If we are to live out our faith in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and if we strive to have a world community that is peaceful and bringing justice to all, we must pay attention to this calling. And I say this today on UN Sunday. Even though I know the sixth principle might seem a little out of date or maybe an impossible dream, maybe sort of foolish in its hopefulness, can we continue to say we want world community and peace, liberty, and justice for all? Was that a liberal dream of the mid-20th century? Is it out of date now? The world is full of genocide, abuse, terror, and war. So what have we gotten ourselves into if we say it's a core part of our faith to care about the world? The Unitarian Universalist minister Sean Dennison has made this point. He says, as naive or impossible as the sixth principle may seem, we cannot give up on it. In the face of our culture's apathy and fear, we need to imagine and help create a powerful vision, a vision of peace by peaceful means, liberty by liberatory means, and justice by just means. Reverend Dennison says, I want us to believe, and I want us to live as if we believe that a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all is possible. There is no guarantee we will succeed, but I can assure you, if we make that our goal, we will improve ourselves, and we will improve the world just by trying. Just recently, Star Trek Captain Kirk, now a 90-year-old actor named William Shatner, returned from a 10-minute flight to see the world from space. He was awestruck, changed, moved to tears, and said he hopes he never loses the feeling. What moved him when he went up there for that moment was the fragility of the thin blanket of atmosphere that holds us all in life on the same planet that's of Earth, that thin blanket that separates us from the blackness and cold of space. Let us remember always, all people on all parts of the world are sharing this fragile planet. It's all we've got. And our world is one world, And the more we remember that, the more our hearts will call us to nurture the relationships with people of the earth. Our world is one world, and our faith calls us ever to reach out to one another in compassion and justice. May it be so. Amen.
Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes, with love or hate we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
I want you to not despair, but be hopeful. That in fact, when the world sees itself as one world and we see ourselves as lifting up those values, we can make a difference. We lit the chalice this morning in honor of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And I want you to not let that light go out in your heart. Even though we're extinguishing our flame here now, and you extinguish the flames in your home, keep the light alive in your heart and know that you too can make a difference, and we together can help the world. Amen. Take it away, Scott.